Everybody, it's Dana Brigman. I am live on Zoom if you want to join me there. The link was posted in the Facebook group just a few minutes ago. So would love to see you in the Zoom so that you can interact and ask questions. So this week, allergies, seasonal allergies, environmental allergies, and all of the stress that puts pet parents through and dogs through has been on my mind. I have a couple of clients this week that are really struggling and have been for quite a while. And so I sat down and started trying to work on updating my allergy guide. I'm going to share my screen here for those of you in the Zoom. Hang on a second. Trying to multitask. Anyway, they've done all of the basics and they are still struggling. So today we're going to talk about this and what are some of the next steps that we can do and things that people can work on. If you're on the Zoom call, I hope that you can unmute yourself if you need to step in and ask the question, because driving might be a challenge for me. So feel free to pop in if you need to. So let's talk a little bit about what allergies are and what we're up against. I think most of us start with the premise that it is a food allergy, which really should be described as an intolerance, meaning in most cases, we are not setting off allergies in such a way that we go into anaphylaxis, right? We are seeing more of the skin flare-ups or the digestive flare-ups. And so we can begin with the elimination diets or doing some intolerance testing that may give us steps towards the right outcomes. But for many of the clients, that's not quite enough. And so as we move into this spring season, actually, we've already entered it, but as we get there, we're dealing with the pollens and the pines and the grasses growing and all of those kinds of things. We may also see environmental allergens inside of the home. These can be anything from your cleaning products to your fabric sprays, laundry soaps, plug-ins, all of those. And so when we get into that category, we are basically in that inhalant, that environmental, and in some cases, the contact allergies, meaning they're picking it up on their skin and coming into contact with something that is setting them off. So this is known as atopy. If you think of, I don't even know what I was going to say about that. But anyway, it's called atopy, and it can be a genetic predisposition, right? In some ways, it may be something that the dog has developed because their gut health is out of balance, or because something in their system is not allowing them to deal with these factors that they're coming into effectively. So I think that's where we're getting into trouble. So when we have these situations of, we have tried the elimination diet, we got really strict and went with something like an 80-10-10 grind or a homemade food that was literally meat for a couple of days. And then we start adding in a few veggies, and then we started adding in the things that are going to help balance and round out that nutrition profile, and we're still struggling, then it's probably not going to be the food. It may be a factor, but there's probably something deeper going on in there. So what do we start to see? Chronic itching. We don't always see something show up on the skin other than the dog is irritated. We know they are gnawing and scratching, but we may not see an issue in and on the skin itself. We might see redness, we might see hair loss, we might see inflammation show up in the ears, in the armpits, in the leg pits, Lots of places that we see that red hot inflammation show up. Okay. It does not have to be a hot spot, does not have to be a yeast infection, and it doesn't have to be bacteria for these things to still be a significant problem. One thing that we notice is that for dogs who have been on the antibiotics and steroids, the symptoms seem to get better, but if you stop them, then you go right back to where you were, meaning the root has not been resolved. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind too, and this was an interesting thing as I was digging out notes this weekend, is that if we have 2 or more episodes of this type of flare up, we may be dealing with something that is more akin to an autoimmune type dysfunction, right? Meaning something is happening in the body that the immune system cannot manage on its own. So where do we go from here? These are all just symptoms. So I started working on this document and it became 42 pages, which most of you are never going to read. Some of you are going to say, hey, I want a copy. We're going to make it available out on the forum, but it's long. And so it just is starting to describe a lot of these types of issues so that you can look and see what category you're actually falling into. Okay. So we start again with the diet. We start looking at gut health first. This means, what are the proteins? We need to think about that traditional Chinese medicine way of thinking and move out of anything that is fueling inflammation, anything that is creating heat in the body. So that means we go away from farm-raised salmon. We go away from
meeting call.
We go away from chicken. We go away from venison, right? We need to get out of those categories and into the cooling range, which is more of the turkey, the whitefish, the duck, and the rabbit, for example. Every food, for the most part, I mean, could be categorized as warming, neutral, or cooling according to Chinese medicine. So even when we start adding back in the veggies and the fruits and all of those things, we are trying to evaluate what foods will cool or quell this heat and this inflammation that's happening in the body. Okay. We begin with, somebody's asking, is it on now? Yes, I don't know how to respond to you and multitask at the same time. So we often start here with trying to manage the histamines, right? We talked about the gut, that's first and foremost. Then we move into the range of adding in something that fights the allergen. Some people will start with things like Benadryl or Zyrtec. In the natural space, we start looking at something like quercetin, which is considered nature's Benadryl. We will add in things like stinging nettles or omegas or vitamin C and mushrooms to really try and manage that histamine response that the body kicks off when it's exposed to one of these triggers. Okay. What we sometimes don't think about is there a mineral deficiency? This is becoming more and more common in what I see, that even though we are feeding excellent diets, high quality diets, we may not be absorbing those nutrients well. There may be something dysregulated in the body that means we are not pulling in those nutrients and using them appropriately, which in turn creates one of these types of flare-ups. Okay, so we start looking at zinc as a possibility of being deficient. Zinc, selenium, and magnesium are very common in this category. You can test, you can do a hair mineral analysis test to determine that for sure. If that, if your dog is deficient in those areas, or we can experiment a little bit at a time to add some of these supplementations and see if that helps. We know that there are foods that help us achieve these, but you can also look at supplemental support. One thing we know, and I'll just give you, for example, in magnesium, if we are giving too much, we're going to move into a diarrhea type problem. So even in the human world, that's one of the ways we measure dosing, or we figure out the dosing is you dose magnesium until you reach a point of diarrhea, and then you back off to where you were the previous day on that level of dose, and you try to stay there for a while. I had to do that personally because I was personally depleted in magnesium, which triggered some other heart health issues. So I take a magnesium supplement. Let me rephrase that. I used to take a magnesium supplement. Now I have switched to a product called Beam Minerals, which is absolutely fantastic, but it covers all the minerals that we might be missing. So there are options to do this. So going down the list of things to try next, we look at minerals. And there is a version of mineral supplementation from Beam Minerals for dogs. That's how I got introduced to it. I started looking for answers for dogs, and then they're like, oh, we have a human product too, which is really the same. Trust me, I've tested and tried both of them. The dogs is just fewer volume, less amount of how much they have to take. Okay, so we mentioned the, no, we didn't mention this. We talked about the elimination diet. That's really next. So looking at your home environment, and you're still struggling with allergies, the allergic response, you need to look around the house as a whole at everything, from your cleaning products to the candles you're using to the laundry dryer sheets. All of those things need to be evaluated and potentially eliminated from your home. Your dog is going to absorb all of that through the skin, through the inhalation of anything that is synthetic, fragranced, chemical based. They're going to absorb that into and through their body, right? So they're in your home most likely more than you are, especially if you have to go to work every day, right? You leave the dog behind. So he's in the house 8 hours longer than you are every day, and may be less tolerant to some of these environmental irritants than you are. We look at the elimination diet. So I mentioned this earlier. We get really strict. We eliminate everything unless it's some medically needed supplement or medication, right? We eliminate everything, get down to meat with its bone and with its organ meats, right? And we see, can the dog handle that and that alone? And then if so, then we can start adding in other vegetables, fruits, things of that nature. And then in a few days, we could test a different protein. So now we're starting to evaluate, can I create stability in a very limited fashion? We know when we get into these elimination diets that it is temporary. These will not be long-term diets, okay? It is just to help us isolate what's going on. You can also do an intolerance test. I recommend Glacier Peaks, and you can find links to all of the things that we'll be talking about tonight on my website. Just search for affiliate links and you'll see a list of everything pop up. And I've been trying to categorize it by type of product. The intolerance tests are not 100% accurate in all cases. It does give you a really good starting point. But you also have to remember that like in Glacier Peaks, for example, there are two options. One, that you test a dog that's on a processed diet, and one that you test a dog that's on a raw fed diet, for example. Because the more processing and the different ways in which foods are prepared or treated will have an impact. You will even see when you get an intolerance test back that the dog might trigger on something like chicken muscle meat, but not chicken liver. And so people get really confused about why that's the case. It has to do with the organs of the body and the waste management system and how new those organs are, for example, or how long that animal has been around, right? So there's lots of reasons why they could eat one part of the animal but not others. We know that if they wound up out in the wild, so to speak, that they're not going to pick and choose and I'm intolerant to the liver, can't have that, but I can eat the rest of it. They're never going to do that. But they're also not likely to be up against all of these environmental factors that we are exposing them to every day. So food is a big, big piece of this equation. This needs a different header. So fulvic and humic acids. These, along with binders, are the things that can help move things out of the body. So when we take in something like heavy metals or glyphosate or mold or synthetics, the body doesn't manage them well. It doesn't know what to do with them. So they're not always fully utilized, and sometimes they're not utilized at all. So if the waste management system can't expel them, they start getting stored in the body. Okay. So when we come in and we start talking about detox work and adding in things that are going to likely help us purge some of these things, we run the risk of things just floating around in the environment, getting all stirred up and just moving from somewhere where they originated to somewhere different in the body. So the goal is to get them out. And how we do that is with something like a fulvic humic acid or a binder that captures this stuff and really helps it get expelled. We may never achieve 100%, but we can at least improve that process. So again, that's one of the reasons I love this product called Beam, BEAM, like a balance beam, right? Beam minerals and electrolytes. They are fantastic products when we have our senior dogs, when some of these dogs, or when we have the need to help move things and support that mineral deficiency and to move things out. One of the places that we often turn to is digestive enzymes. And they can be really helpful. If your dog is not absorbing the nutrients that we're giving them well, then digestive enzymes may be appropriate to add. The question is, which ones? There are many choices. I tend to choose a broad spectrum in most cases. I will either recommend pure encapsulation or vital essentials, and I think it's NFH. These are all in the full script dispensary. You are all offered an opportunity to have an account. I don't care what you buy or when you buy or how much you buy. None of that is relevant. It's just an account I offer to my clients and to members of my group to be able to go in and have access to professional grade supplementation products that we know and trust. There are over 20,000 products in there. Most of them are human grade products and human products, many of which we then repurpose for the dog, but there are also some veterinary products in there as well. So two I really like. One is Allergies and another is called Sulfurzyme. So when we think about sulfurzyme, the goal there is not only are we adding enzymes, but we're adding sulfur to the diet. So sulfur is extremely important and could be part of the problem that is not allowing the dog to heal properly. One of my friends and I were at a workshop a couple years ago talking to a couple veterinarians who are also in the young living space, and said, look, we've tried everything. We've tried it all. What do we do? And she said, well, have you tried sulfurzyme? And so the answer was no. And we did, and we wound up giving the dog quite a lot, right? We did some muscle testing to figure out how much she needed at any given day. And we let her ride with that supplement for a couple of weeks. And guess who doesn't have these issues anymore? We got it resolved, and adding sulfur in the form of this sulfurzyme product was extremely effective. Is that the right answer for your dog? Maybe, maybe not, because all of these are very individualized. Probiotics, we often turn to as well. So we know there's a gut connection here, right? We know if we don't have the gut system right, the immune system will struggle. If the immune system's struggling, then we're not going to respond to these environmental allergens well. So it's all a process. So you can add in probiotics. You need a broad spectrum, unless you know there is something very specific in your dog's history. There are strains of probiotics that target very specific things. So if there's a history of something that's been happening with your dog that we know of, then we can target specific strains. But if we're looking for a general broad spectrum, then the one that I turn to most often is Phytospore or Megaspore. They are from the same company. They both have 4 billion CFU in them. The only difference is the Phytospore tastes like liver, right? So that the dog will think of it more as a treat than a supplement. The Megaspore, I just crack open and put into the food. I use the same Megaspore for myself that I use for the dog. So buy one product and we share and we move on. If I want to increase the amount of CFU that I'm giving the dog, I can double that dose, right? So I'm not overdosing. I'm just increasing the colony forming units that are going in. But that's going to become a very slow ramp. There are products that will take us as high as 50 billion in one single entry, right? So we have to experiment with that a little bit. What I do most often is pick like Phytospore, for example, and then rotate in kefir or goat's milk or sauerkraut or some other fermented vegetation that gives me a variety of supplement and real food probiotics. Probiotics need prebiotics, and where I start with that is typically in the fresh foods, right? But we can also add in functional mushrooms, aka medical mushrooms, which they don't like us calling them medical anymore since I am not a medical professional. Ha! Welcome to the world of health. So, let's see. So moving into the supplement category, and this is going to all make its way into the community forum, and you can see the amount of dosage that are suggested as your starting point. But again, we do a lot of muscle testing to figure out what amount may be needed for the individual. But if we're looking at supplements, I mentioned quercetin earlier. It is a natural antihistamine. We often pair that with nettles. You may see them called stinging nettles. These are herbal supplements that help manage the histamine response and can help quell that itching a little bit. Bromelain is another that's often paired with quercetin. So sometimes you will see combo supplements that include these together. Now brand has a quercetin and nettles combo product. You can find that in the full script. You can find it on the Dr. Ruth site. I think they're on Amazon as well. There is a product in full script called Hist Relief, Hist Relief, that has a lot of these things. Like there's 7 or 8 different things in one supplement to really target all of these elements, right? So that is proving to be helpful for some. Yeah, the Histopause is pretty much exactly like the Now brand version of quercetin and nettles. It's just under Dr. Ruth's label instead of Now brand. We can look at colostrum. We've talked about digestive enzymes, probiotic. We can look at CBD, and we can look at adding milk thistle. So remember, I have been on a little rampage for a while about doing the liver cleanse every spring. If this is something that happens to your dog every spring and you are not doing the liver cleanse prior to getting here, that is something you need to add to the repertoire. But at minimum, add some milk thistle in the range of about 10, maybe to as high as 25 milligrams per 10 pounds of body weight. You're going to start much lower than that and ramp so that we're not moving things too fast. But adding milk thistle is easy and affordable and should be done through all of the summer months if your dog is prone to these issues. So there's another product that I really like now called Genetian Allergy from Herbsmith. This is in part of their prescription level products. This is a professional product that is typically not going to be found on Amazon, even though they do have a product out there called Allergy Alert. I can't even pronounce it the way they spell it. It's ALLERQI, as in chi, right? The life force of energy, chi. They have a product called Allergy that may be helpful for some, but if you need the professional level grade, I can order and drop ship that to anybody. Okay, we have options for essential oils. So one of the things we have to do while we're healing the gut, which can take a long time, is to soothe the exterior as well, right? So this is where you'll start to see Epsom salt soaks, and maybe you take those Epsom salt soaks and add a little bit of essential oil to the soak or to the bath water, or sponging it over the dog and just letting that help soothe their skin for a while. Oils that I would add would include lavender, copaiba, frankincense, Roman chamomile. If it's like really hot spotted, like bright red and oh my God kind of thing, then I might look at something like Melrose. We can turn these into misting sprays that also include green tea and or chamomile tea, and do things that spray the dog down and offer some soothing that way. I love things like the Animal Sense ointment from Young Living, and I love the CBD Dog Health Soothe. They are very soothing to the skin and can be zhuzhed up with those essential oils we're talking about for even more soothing effects, and maybe helping to heal from the outside as well. We kind of hit on the herbs a little bit. Nettles falls into that herb category. Milk thistle falls into the herb category. Other things that we can see would be burdock root, calendula. You can go get a calendula cream almost anywhere. You can get chamomile tea and brew it and make little tea compresses or little cotton round compresses that you just soothe on the dog in those areas, or turn them into misting sprays. So here's an area that we don't talk about enough, or I don't. And that's moving into homeopathy as well. There comes a point where the dog's just so on fire that we need something for that acute response. when we treat something with an acute approach, we are not necessarily healing the root, right? We're just helping to get through the day. And so what we look at in the homeopathic remedies would be apis. So anytime we have red, hot, or puffy type skin, we look at apis. I mentioned sulfur as a supplement earlier. We can get sulfur in the form of a homeopathic remedy that helps soothe the itchy skin that gets worse when it's hot outside or when the dog is really irritable. Then we choose sulfur. So remember that homeopathic remedies are chosen based on the symptom. It's not guesswork. We choose it based on the symptom. Okay. There's one called Natmur, M-U-R. That's a much longer name that I'll never pronounce right. So if we've got seasonal sneezing or dry cracked skin, we can choose that one. And then there's one that's a general antihistamine type product called histaminum, Histaminum. And we can use that for those allergic type responses. I use that one personally quite a lot when I know I'm going into a home with a cat, or if I've been exposed to a cat, then I will take that one before I go or after I've been exposed, and it really helps me with those contact inhalant type things. And where the cats get me is always in my eyes. It's like they have put some sort of sandpaper in my eyeballs when I'm exposed to a cat. Thuja, Thuja, that most of you are familiar with as a detox for vaccinations. We can include that and do a vaccine detox, even if it's been a long time since the last vaccine, if you can say that the allergies developed or got worse after vaccines, right? So meaning there was a period of time that there were no allergies, and then something shifted. We got a vaccine, or we had some other procedure, or we had something, and now we're flared up with allergies a whole lot. Then we may turn to Thuja for those. Okay. So the next part of this, the document, and the reason it was getting so long is I was explaining a lot of things like CBD and how much to use, or mushrooms, and really starting to understand that it's not just about giving a mushroom, it's how many beta glucans are you giving, and what's in your choice of mushrooms. How were they prepared? Are they a high quality option? So everything we talk about, whether it's essential oils or supplements or mushrooms or CBD, they all have a quality factor. They all have some level of dosing that has to be evaluated. Not necessarily just how much is given to the dog, but how much is in that tincture or that powder or that dropper. Because I get people all the time who say to me, I tried CBD and it didn't work. And I say, well, tell me how much is in the bottle or how much is in the dropper. And they think they're given a significant amount, and it winds up being like 3 milligrams for the day. And I'm like, if your dog is this on fire, then that's not going to touch it. Right? So you're right, it didn't work, but it was either not enough, not the right quality, or not the right frequency. And so even when we look at things like mushrooms, and in this scenario, in most cases, we want a blend of mushrooms. The top mushrooms to choose when we have an allergy dog would be reishi, turkey tail, cordyceps, chaga, and lion's mane. A blend. Why these? Reishi is going to help the liver. Reishi is adaptogenic, and it is a histamine modulator. Turkey tail helps regulate the immune system and improve gut health. Cordyceps is anti-inflammatory and manages the adrenals. Chaga is an antioxidant. It supports skin healing. Lion's mane helps the nervous system. So remember, and this is another area I don't think we talk about nearly often enough, is the nervous system and its relationship to the gut-brain axis. And when all of that is out of balance, where else do symptoms show up? And it could be in these types of flare-ups and issues that we're starting to see in some of these dogs. So this is why I'm saying it's not always limited to the food. It could be much, much deeper than that. So when you're choosing your mushrooms, we want to be sort of in a therapeutic range. And I would say the minimum is around 30 to 50 milligrams of 25 pounds of body weight. So when you read the label of your product, there should be a beta glucan number on your mushrooms. How many beta glucans are you given in a dose from that particular brand, that particular label? And we've got to make sure we're achieving the right amount. We may need to be significantly higher than that. We may need to be double that amount when we are in an active flare-up. Okay. Okay, let's see. Omega-3, often not well understood or well given or whatever. Many people make the mistake of choosing an omega-3 6-9, which there are ratios of keeping those numbers, the omega-3, omega-6, omega-9, there's even omega-5, keeping those in a ratio, right? In a profiled ratio. When we have these types of issues that are inflammatory, and it can be an allergy, it could be seizures, it could be cancerous issues, we want to increase the omega-3, which is the anti-inflammatory, antioxidant piece of this, without increasing the 6 and the 9. So if you keep raising them together, you're never going to shift the balance, right? And so we want to increase the omega-3s to probably as high as 200 milligrams of total omega-3, that's total EPA and DHA, per kilogram of body weight, or per 2.2 pounds of dogs. And I have that spelled out in the form as well. If in case you can't calculate that out, you can ask me, or you'll see that listed in the form also. But you've got to increase the amount of omega that's going in. If your dog has an intolerance to things like anchovies or sardines or mackerel, then you can look at a soil-based omega, an algae-based omega. We have many options. It is harder to achieve those doses when you're trying to give something like flaxseed only. So we have to look at some of the options. But I'll also remind you that if you were feeding like fresh fish, it's not going to function the same way that a processed product would. So you may have to experiment with those as well. And then antioxidants. So think your blueberries and your watermelon and celery and all of those things that we can add to the food that are cooling according to Chinese medicine, but also give us some detox type support, some antioxidant clearing type effects in our foods. But we can also look at bumping up our vitamin C, right? Vitamin C can be increased. We can look at things like, I never say this right, N-acetylcysteine, NAC, some of you may have seen that called. It is the thing that helps the body make glutathione, right? Glutathione being a master antioxidant. If we're not making it, we may have to supplement. We may have to supplement so that the body can make it better, or we may have to actually supplement glutathione. right? So there's lots of options there. And then you may hear about alpha lipoic acid as a supplement option as well. But going back to the food category, think fruits, blueberries, strawberries, cranberries, blackberries, watermelon, cantaloupe, apples. These are all cooling things that are going to help the body detox a little bit, but also cool and quell the heat that's going on in there. With vegetables, remember we talked a lot about that elimination diet and getting down to almost nothing but meat, right? Nothing but the proteins. And when we do start adding them in, don't go for the heavy veggies, right? Don't go into those root veggies like sweet potatoes and pumpkin and all that kind of stuff. They're fantastic, but don't start there. Start with celery and cucumbers and lettuce and cabbage, those lighter greens, right? And they are also in that cooling category, and see if adding in those gentler veggies that help cool while they're working are more effective than jumping into the spinach and the kale. Okay, so just think about that as you start trying the way forward. And then if you need a real antioxidant type supplement, there are two that are kind of top of the line in my opinion. One of them is Ninja Red from Young Living, and then the other would be a product called C60. You may or may not have heard of that. It is really one of the best available antioxidant products out there that I have found and come across. Is certainly one I bring into the cancer protocols for dogs as well. The Herb Smith Allergy, that's, remember, ALLERQI that I mentioned, it is an herbal supplement and it does have some antioxidant effects. So that's a good choice to try also. And Phytosynergy, which is a marine phytoplankton from Adored Beast, is a good option to try as well. We mentioned the binders. Again, I like the Beam supplements, the Beam mineral supplements, because it's the fulvic humic acids with the electrolytes, and it helps get all that stuff moved and moved out. But other options would be things like chlorella, bentonite clay, activated charcoal, zeolite. There's a company called Cellcore that I represent as well that has some excellent binder options as alternatives. So if you need help understanding when and how and why to try a binder, I am happy to talk to you. But certainly things like pesticides, vaccines, mold, chemicals in the house, any of those kinds of things, heavy metals, would be appropriate to consider doing a detox that requires a binder to help it get out. Okay, if you are doing a detox of some sort and the symptoms get worse, not unexpected, but that's a good clue that you probably need to include a binder. Okay. I added today a questionnaire, a quiz, if you will, out on my website. So welloldcanine.com/download. It was a typo, and it just is. Maybe one day I'll fix it to where it says downloads, because there's multiples out there. I think there's 51 of them out there right now, and more coming. But this quiz is free, and it will help you determine your dog's Chinese medicine constitution, personality, whatever you want to call that, right? And so you may have heard me talk about this: wood dogs, fire dogs, earth dogs, metal dogs, and water dogs, right? we're probably in most cases dealing with either a wood dog or a fire dog. In most cases, fire dogs are going to react the most to these seasonal changes. They're most likely to have anxiety. They're most likely to be hot-headed. Think those fired up, attitudinal, pissed off kind of dog, and also to have these red hot, itchy flare-ups. So anytime we think red hot and heat, that's most likely a fire dog. The wood dog is prone to some liver issues. We may see the skin rashes or the irritated eyes. Remember, the eyes are associated with the liver. So a wood dog could have some of these issues as well. The question is, which one is your dog, right? Once we know that, then we can start customizing the food into those categories that help us deal with that. Foods, herbs, essential oils, they all tend to deal with either warming the body or cooling the body or dealing with something that we would call damp, right? Where there's moist, damp, congestion, things aren't moving the way they might need to, or there's heat. So we figure that out by figuring out the dog's constitution. And if anything else is showing up as a secondary or something that would be out of balance, because they all need each other to work. I see in my brain the chart that shows them sort of it's usually in a star form. But if one's out of balance, then the others are going to have to struggle to compensate. And so once we can start to figure that out, then we can figure out how to more effectively target the actions that we're taking. So that quiz is available. You can download it. You can look at it on your own. You can ask me about it or not. It's entirely up to you. I also look a lot at the eyes. So I am working with somebody to learn iridology. It's not new to me, but the certification would be, right? So I'm learning a whole lot. In fact, somebody just texted me a photo of a dog and I said, the dog's in trouble. Because you can see all the problems showing up in the eyeballs. And so we'll talk more about that as we go. And if you're doing a consultation, this would be something we would look at. So in the handout or the download, I have all those homeopathic remedies that we can use to manage the flare up, along with the herbs and the Epsom salt soaps and all of those things. So it's all kind of documented in here and got way too big to be out of control. Raindrop technique, for those of you who are essential oil people, I love this. It is one of my favorite things to do for any dog for any reason. Why the raindrop helps the allergy dogs is it will work on liver and lymphatic support, detox. It can help strengthen the immune system. It can help calm the histamine effects and what we call the inflammatory cascades. And it can help rebalance the nervous system, which is essential to all of the things to keep our body in balance. And then we know that it goes through and works at the meridian level, and we compare it with acupuncture or acupressure that you and I can do and things of that nature. Okay, I think that's, there's something called the Baihu acupressure point. I don't speak Chinese, so I'm not very good at it. B-A-I-H-U-I, acupressure point, which is basically right back here. You can't see my little guy, can you? Those of you on Facebook can. On the computer, it is falling apart. So I have this little stuffed animal. This is his hind end. So if you come in, there's a little divot in here, right? You never want to press on the spine, but there's a little acupressure point right here that's called the Heavenly Gate. It's governing vessel 20, and it is the Heavenly Gate, they call it. And if you stimulate that area, it can help regulate the chi, the QI, and the energetic fields in the nervous system and all that comes with that. So that can be effective when you're sitting there helping, petting your dog, and you want to do a little acupressure in some of those areas. You can start learning to do that. So we've talked about a whole bunch of stuff. We've talked about everything from toxins around us, vaccines, environmental factors in the home. In addition to that, take a look at like Wi-Fi and electromagnetic issues. So when you've gone through everything else, the things that we're left looking at would be like electromagnetics in the house, or mold, or biotoxins, or lymphatic congestion, which all the things we talked about above are going to help that category as well. But you may recall that in I think it was February, I kept saying it's time to do the lymphatic congestion detox protocol. And these don't have to be expensive, but they are effective, and they need to be done to help us manage all of the things that are happening to and around us. And then the final thing that we don't talk about enough, again, I mentioned the nervous system, but you're probably hearing a lot come together about the vagus nerve, VAGUS, not Las Vegas, but VAGUS, the vagus nerve, and how to regulate that. And it's interesting because many years ago, when I started training and seeing these dogs that were all messed up emotionally and did not know how to be a dog, that was what I always called it. They don't know how to dog. Ultimately, that's what this was all about, right? Was the vagus nerve was dysregulated. The nervous system was out of balance. And they did not know how to settle and rest and get to that state in the body where it can actually rest, do its digestive work, and get everything reset and ready to roll again the next day. So this even takes us into those conversations about things like the circadian clock. And if you don't believe that it's real, start paying attention, start taking notes. A friend of mine called me a couple of weeks ago, and she said the weirdest thing happened to her dog, that around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the dog started having sort of this episode, and very out of the norm, but very specific symptoms were taking place, and the behavior was changed, and it was just sort of erratic and uncontrollable in that moment. She was having a real scene, right? Long story short, turns out this dog had a raging UTI, and the time of day associated with that was in the like 3 to 5 window in the afternoon. And guess what? That's all about the kidney bladder system, that time of day. If your dog is waking up every night between 1 and 3 in these itchy, scratchy episodes, or got to go outside or whatever, and it's consistently happening in certain windows of time, we look at what system of the body is in priority at that time of day. But that 1 to 3 a.m. is the liver. That's when it needs to go into its primary purpose of detoxification. And if it can't, if it's not functioning properly, then we're going to likely see some issues. We'll see them in the form of all these things we've been talking about. We may even see a dog that's waking up at that time or most uncomfortable at that time. Okay, so the circadian clock in Chinese medicine not only functions on a daily basis, but it functions on that seasonal basis as well, which is where we get into those wood, fire, earth, metal, and water elements. Okay. And then finally, I think this is finally, if we've tried all those other things and we're still struggling, we may have to start looking at doing some biome work, which might include something called an FMT transfer, or a fecal microbiota transplant, where the waste material has been effectively processed and capsulized into a little gel cap that can then be given to your dog in the form of a gel cap or entry to their food, to replenish and to start to rebuild the biome of the gut. So I don't know if I mentioned this already or not. In the probiotic category, if you give your dogs probiotics and they cannot tolerate the probiotic, that is almost certainly a clue that the biome is really a mess, right? And so that may lead us directly into doing FMT work straight out of the gate, right? If you've done everything else and not FMT, then it's time to try that, right? Definitely time to try that. And there are tests. There is a biome test that's available. It's also on my affiliate links, where you can test your dog's biome and have them recommend which of their products are most appropriate for your dog. There was something else I was going to say about that. The test, don't remember, but there, like I said earlier too, there are tests that you can test for heavy metals. There's a test for glyphosate. There's all sorts of things that you can test for. The challenge is the budget, and I get it, which is why, as I started putting this back together, again, I don't know that I'm going to give anybody, I don't know that anybody's going to sit down and read 42 pages of all of this stuff, but I realized I need to be a little more mobile in how quickly I move somebody from one phase to the other. Meaning, if we've been on this path of changing the food and doing all these elimination work and adding the digestive enzymes and the probiotics and trying the soothing stuff, and still not better after about 8 weeks, maybe 12, it's time to do something very different. And that's probably going to move us into this biome category. So, all right, I'm going to revisit. I'm going to blow this back up and stop sharing for those that might have been on the Zoom and see if there are any. I only see one person on my Zoom. Y'all are making me sad. So I'll just pause for a minute and see if there are any questions. Okay, don't see any questions. If you have questions, you can post them in Facebook. Let me know what they are. And then tomorrow, it's almost 8 o'clock now. So this will be tomorrow that I re-edit or take the video and move it to the community forum. But it'll be there for several days to look at in a visitor type state, right? Anybody can go look at it. And then after a few days, it will move into the private community forum for them for that as well. I might put it on YouTube. I'll have to think about that. Let's see, I'm looking at a question that is being blocked by my closed captioning. So let's see what it says. Sharon, I know you're on the Zoom, and I thought I saw it pop up a question, but I don't see the question in the chat. Where did that go?
I don't know.
Did you have a question? Feel free to unmute and ask me.
Shoot.
I hear you and I see you.
Okay, I don't know how to ask okay, so you can hear me.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have a question, but I think I do now. You mentioned about the Glacier Peak, the tolerance test. Well, I did that last year, and it was on processed food.
Mm-hmm.
So now I guess it kind of makes sense because they were allergic to a lot of stuff. So now now that he's kind of on homemade food now, or both of them are, do I really need to do it again and really see what's going on because he's still having the problems?
So the short answer is maybe.
Okay.
So I, the intolerance tests are not 100% accurate, right?
Yes.
They are also ideally of where we are today. So if we do the work and we've made the changes and we're not seeing the results, then we may need to test again for what has changed, if anything. It is possible to be intolerant to something very specific today, do all the work, and not be intolerant to it in the future, right? Because the body is more adaptable. The body is better regulated. The body is not sidetracked by something new coming in if it's sort of in its optimal health, right? So it's possible. The challenge that I have is a lot of dog mamas are like, I'm not even going there. We know chicken blew them up last year. We are not going to try it. But again, it's possible to heal the gut and no longer have those intolerances. So my thought on the testing is it gets expensive.
Right.
If you've already done that and not having success with the changes they recommended, and you've tried some of these other things, then I would consider the next test to maybe be from the animal biome category, not just another Glacier Peaks, but go into the animal biome. Let's see, I think it's animal biome and they call it doggy biome because there's a feline version as well, and run that test, or really step back and go, could this be heavy metals or glyphosate or something along those lines, and make sure we're doing that detox work too. Or you can test the hair and mineral analysis test. So there's tests for all of those. It's a matter of really stepping back and saying what's most likely, so that you're not just flinging money at all these tests.
Okay. Before it kind of ends, I kind of like there's just, I don't know where to go to really talk to you about all this. Not a Facebook person, but I try to scroll and see things and I can't find it again. So
I feel you. Yeah. So my website is always a great starting point. It's welloiledcanine.com.
yes, ma'am.
There is a lot of blog resources out there and a lot of downloads are available so the blog is more of those entry level topics, right? Food for thought, things to think about, here's some suggested products. If you want to dig deep into a consultation for your individual dog, then schedule a consult with me and we'll kick things off from there. The community forum that I have is really a library. And I think of it like easy to cross-reference. Like if I walked into this library and said, I'm looking for all things related to allergies, and I typed in the word allergies, it's going to show me everything that I've put there. That's for some too overwhelming, right? That's too much. But other people are like, I want to learn it all. And so I'm trying to categorize and organize things that way. So that community forum is free to my clients. If you buy a package of services, you get in there. But it's also available that somebody could purchase a monthly subscription for a while. There's a 7-day free trial for everybody. You could get in there for a month or for years. So there are options of ways to do that as well.
Okay.
And
thank
it's
you,
not Facebook. It is an internet-based place for communication.
Mark. Okay, I will definitely look at that.
Mhm. Okay. I don't see anybody asking questions on the Facebook Live. So if there are no more questions, then we'll wrap things up. Tomorrow I will post a link to the download that if you want to take a look at 42 pages of my thinking, you can. It's all going to make its way to the forum, and it'll be structured in bite-sized chunks. So, and hopefully give people a path to be on instead of just trying to flip pages and figure out what applies to them. So, okay.
Thank you for hosting.
You're welcome. I hope you all learned something tonight. And if you have questions, just let me know what they are.
Absolutely.
Y'all have a good one.